Welcome to the Recruiter Startup Podcast. My name's Dualta, and in this podcast series, I will be speaking to investors, advisors, entrepreneurs, and recruiters who are based all over the world, and we'll be discussing how to set up, scale, operate, and even sell a world-class recruitment company. And to do that, you need a world-class advisor. And I'm delighted to say that today's guest is John O'Sullivan. He's the chairman of Elite Leaders and probably the best known and trusted advisor and non-exec in the UK recruitment industry. John's been in the industry for 35 years, helped hundreds of founders build their companies for sale, and he was an unbelievable guest and gives us a great insight into his world. He first came on my radar because he's been given a shout out a few times on the podcast. He probably doesn't promote himself as much as other non-executive directors out there, but I think you'll tell from the interview that he's quietly confident in where he sits in the order of things. Safe from Digital Gurus. He managed to achieve an exit with Digital Gurus still in the business when they sold to the Rethink Group, and John was an advisor on both sides of the coin on that one. And that just gives you an idea of the level of this guy, where he's able to be, in effect, the kingmaker of the UK recruitment industry. Over to John.
That worked that time. It didn't show up properly the first time.
All right, John. Welcome to the Recruiter Startup Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So, John, you've been called the Godfather of UK recruitment by a CEO of a company recently. You've just joined McDowey as their chairman. Is that right?
Yeah, I have. Yes, very recently. Although I'm going to kill him for calling me the Godfather. It's got horse's head connotations.
I know. The kingmaker, the Godfather. You've been around for quite some time. How long have you been in the industry now, John?
So just over about 35 years now in recruitment from the time I first joined, which was back in 1986, I think it was. So 33 years. 33
What keeps you still going?
In general or in recruitment?
In recruitment, it's like, some people last 18 months. What is it that this industry has grabbed you like so much that you just can't get away from it?
Well, I guess as an industry, a lot of people, sometimes are guarded about the fact that they're in it at all. I think it's an industry that we should be proud of. And in fact, I think of it as almost another profession. And what grabs me is the difference that you can make to either people's lives by finding them life-changing opportunities at an operational level, or the difference you can make to the fortunes of companies that you harness talent for. And I think it's a really powerful industry when those things combine. It gives a great sense of achievement. Of course, a lot of people have done very well in the world of recruitment, including myself.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned that about the professions. I suppose the core difference between profession and recruitment is that anybody can get into it, really. Yeah. There's no course, there's no governing body as such that prevents somebody from trading. So would you be for more regulation in the industry?
Well, I think so. I mean, I call it profession loosely, but you are right. You don't have to go to and study for 4, 5, 6, 7 years to be a recruiter, although you can improve yourself. There's a lot of good training and qualifications around. But there's something about the low barriers to entry, and I know you're focusing particularly on startups. That's appealing because I guess quality swims to the top in the end. And if you're not a committed professional person or a committed professional company, then you will only last 18 months, which is something you said a few moments ago. It's a self-selection thing. But yeah, I guess, it's something that's been talked about many times before to make the industry more accountable and professional. Perhaps it should have a little more regulation around it.
Perhaps. The bit that really interests me that you just said there is that quality rises to the top in it, and that if you get the right mix right, anybody can be successful in it. So I do like that it's inclusive in that way that maybe other industries aren't. You can't, like I've followed you initially on your interview in the REC, and I'm conscious not to kind of go over too much of the same stuff that they did there. But if anybody wants to check out that, there's a great backstory to your recruitment career. Why I wanted to get you on was because I've had a few guests on, and your name's been mentioned, and especially Safe from Digital Nomads, and he said like he was very lucky that you took him on board and were a guiding force in them getting their exit. When you're looking at young founders, like maybe the way that they were at that stage, what type of things are you looking for to work out, okay, this is somebody who's worth my time?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Digital gurus you're referring to, aren't you?
Yeah, so, that's right.
Yeah, I mean, they're a good case in point. I think first, because obviously I get to meet a lot of founders, a lot of very aspirational, ambitious recruitment companies, and I suppose what I'm looking for in terms of getting involved is, is this a company that seriously wants to do something, that wants to achieve a real differentiation in the industry into the future. And with those guys in particular, when I met them, they were members of Elite Leaders about 8 years ago. There was just something about them that you could tell they were very determined. They were very clearly ready to take external advice. And the story there. Over 5 years together working with them, we built it into a really serious contender that resulted in them being acquired by a bigger player. So it's that sort of, I guess it's determination, and added to things like strong brand. I mean, their brand was amazing. The sector that they're in, you couldn't really do better than digital then, and probably still now. And just a lot of the practices, the way they recruited really good people, the way they trained and retained them, I found very appealing.
Yeah, I remember starting my own business. I don't know, it's about 4 years ago now, and I remember seeing their brand and just thinking, they've really just hit the current mood well.
Yeah.
Were you aware of that at that moment when you seen it?
Oh yeah, very much so. And in fact, so much so that as part of a company that acquired them, the Rethink Group, Digital Gurus is still very much a dominant brand within that group. So it stood the test of time. So definitely aware of it back then. It was definitely sort of rising up the pop charts quickly, and still the case. It's still a very, very cool brand, and actually the branding is refreshed all the time, and it really represents what that business is all about. And it's still got the founders' mark all over it, because of course the founders still work for the enlarged group. They're relatively young guys when they sold to Rethink.
And John, you were an advisor to Rethink as well.
Yes.
That. I have this vision of you with a lot of strings on your fingers, pulling and navigating companies together. And am I far off the mark here? Are you?
Well, not really. I mean, it sounds slightly Machiavellian, playing the part of a puppeteer.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I guess in the end, that is my role. If I'm getting involved with any company, I want to enhance that company's growth and get it towards some sort of capital event more quickly than maybe the natural pace of it. And I guess getting a company ready, as in the case of Digital Gurus and many others, by the way, in the Elite Leaders Group, 7 of our companies had some sort of capital event in the last 18 months, whether that was a trade sale, whether that was buying somebody, or whether that was raising private equity capital. But in that particular instance, to me, I saw the fit. Having been a founder and non-exec director of Rethink Group, it was quite clear that, you know, in that instance, 2 and 2 added up to significantly more than 4, and has proven to be the case. So that sort of matching process feels natural to me, and it's the thing that is constantly on my mind when I'm looking at companies within the elite family. I'm looking for, you know, where might they go, which would be a good home, and I think knowing companies intimately from the inside really helps with that, in getting that match right.
So you talk about companies in the same way that most of the listeners will talk about placing a person into a new job that you're. So it's just you've scaled the food chain.
That's a really good analogy, actually, because, you know, an acquisition is for life, not just for Christmas. So you've got to get it right, and I'm sure you know this. There's a huge percentage of recruitment to recruitment acquisitions and mergers that go wrong, because you know, they're just not matched properly, and the cultures don't fit, etc., and the people who are buying or selling don't understand the people issues around it. So my, if you like, mission in life is to make sure any I'm involved with do work.
And I will jump into some of that framework with you because it does interest me. But can I just ask you, you mentioned in the last 18 months, there's been 7 major events out of companies in your network. What's it like, the marketplace right now for those companies in terms of maybe the multiples that they're achieving, the capital that's out there? Like, how's the world changed in the last 10 years? And I asked this because I had a live event, which will be out later in the week, with Mark Zanowski in Brighton. And one of the things he said he's doing different this time with his firm, because he had a major exit with Staff Group a while back. And he said he's making the company sweat more on the way up this time. So he's more conscious to be more profitable and for more people to make more money out of it, as opposed to just driving it towards that end sale. Are you seeing any change in the way that people are viewing business now?
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting comment that you made there from one of your previous guests. Yeah, I mean, look, it's all about profitability in the end, and companies are valued as a multiple against their profits, as I'm sure you know. Yeah, it's not just about that. There's much more to it than that, and part of my working with companies is to work with them looking at the 7 or 8 or 9 different pillars in a business that will make them more valuable than another. And you know, they're relatively straightforward. I mean, profitability is just one of them, but I think what's changed is back in the day, and a lot of people made a lot of money in the 80s, you know, building recruitment companies and selling them to all comers, just based on numbers. And I think there's a lot more to it now. A buyer or an investor is very much interested not just in the quantum, but in the quality and the future of that business. So things around the quality of staff and management, about the systems and methodologies built into the business, about the scale, about the client mix. You know, how do you demonstrate that you can penetrate clients, about the mix between different services, and about the company's attitude to looking forwards and not and being adaptable to changes in the marketplace. Because that's what's changed for me. You can't just build a company with big fat numbers and somebody will buy it. I think you've got to build a company that will stand the rigor of in-depth due diligence on some fairly sophisticated aspects of the business. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Well, as all good answers, it leads to another question. When say a company does come to you and you've got those 7 pillars, before you accept them into your network and agree to work with them, are you running a framework test in order to see where they sit and what needs to be improved within those 7 things?
Yeah, well, not necessarily when they come in within the network of elite leaders, because at that point, you know, companies are just showing a willingness to adapt and grow and learn. But to get a little bit more involved on a personal level, or with one of my associates, we will take a deeper dive and look at a company and see, where is it currently at, and map out how that company needs to adapt and improve certain things in order to get get a ticket to the ball. And it's not necessarily all about building a company for sale, by the way, because I do think that people get bogged down with that. One needs to build a great company anyway, and whether one intends to sell it, keep it, float it, God forbid, get investors in it, or whatever, building a great company involves these steps anyway. We will do a framework test, we'll do strategy days, and then we'll decide, whether given companies want to work with us and a right to work with us. That sounds a bit conceited, but it's true.
And looking at the M&A world right now, what are companies after? Is there a certain discipline? What's hot right now out there for any founder that's thinking, I'm gonna set up, or I'm gonna change my business slightly to be more current with whatever's out there right now?
I think that's a really good question, and like all good questions, there's not a straight answer. I think you can't build necessarily to a formula. You build your business along with your dream, and maybe with one eye on the future as to who might be interested in investing in it. But you can get a little bit bogged down with that. You've got to understand the mindset of different buying communities. So, a big international consolidator may well just want to gain a footprint in the territory in which you operate, either geographically or in terms of the sector that you're in. An investor from a PE point of view, or even private investors, may well be looking to the future shape of the recruitment industry itself and seeing, are you a game changer? Are you a mover within the market? And therefore, are you worth investing in? But I do, yes. So I think clearly you don't want to found a company or continue with a company that's maybe in a shrinking or commoditized sector. And, you don't want to look at markets that are so hugely competitive. It's unlikely that you're going to gain the kind of growth you need. So I think you've got to be mindful of it, but not obsessed with it.
Let me rephrase then. If you were to set up a recruitment company today, and for whatever reason it was the only option that you had, and you had to set up a recruitment company, what would you do to make sure that it was successful and you were able to get the most out of that?
I wouldn't set one up, by the way, because I think it's tougher now to set up than it's ever been, despite what we said earlier with some,
Why is that?
Well, there's a lot of challenges around technology, about legislation and sheer competition. I mean, the UK landscape is the most competitive in the world. I'm sure you know that. It's got more recruitment companies per square inch than anybody else on the planet. So it is hugely competitive, although that shouldn't stop you. But what I'd be looking to do, I mean, absolutely top of my agenda, once I've decided on sector, geography, approach, etc., I'd actually start putting those pillars in place right from the start. And the number one, really, I guess, is people, the kind of people I'd surround myself with. Every industry on the planet says it's all about the people. Never is it so true as it is in recruitment. You've got to have people who are capable of building relationships, who can be persuasive, who've got a pace around them, passionate about the industry. So if I was starting now, and I'm thinking as I'm speaking, as you posed the question, I'd surround myself with great people.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose that's a good lead into asking, what can people get out of like peer-to-peer networking groups?
Well, it's really interesting because Elite Leaders was the first one in the market, although there are other sort of up and coming ones now, as I'm sure you know. And when we set it up 16 years ago now, the idea of competitors sharing best practice and helping one another out was just almost unheard of in the recruitment sector in particular. And I think now there's a realization actually that your competitor is not your enemy. The enemy is the market, the change in customer behavior, candidate behavior, staff behavior, legislation, etc., etc. And actually there's more to be gained by sharing things with like-minded individuals than there is by continuing to believe you've got the silver bullet of recruitment, because you probably haven't. So I think there's a huge amount to be got from it, and it's well proven that peer-to-peer learning is much more effective than any other form of learning. So I'm obviously a huge believer in it, and Elite Leaders continues to have that belief at its heart.
And John, when I look at some of the fastest growing companies and those that have achieved major exits, given there just seems to be like they might operate in the UK, but they're kind of agnostic to where they are doing business. So I see them doing lots of business in Germany and Holland, like in the USA, and they might have like 100 people in the UK doing that.
Yeah.
Do you think maybe people are a bit more open to working in a peer-to-peer sense with each other, because now they're not just all competing in the same backyard? It's a global marketplace and there's enough out there for everybody.
Well, undoubtedly that's true. And your comment about trading internationally is true. Germany, Scandinavia, Holland, even the States, I think they welcome good British recruitment individuals and firms because of the competition I mentioned earlier. I think we're just fitter and better than a lot of the indigenous populations in those countries. But yes, look, in any market that's fragmented in the way that recruitment is. I mean, this year in the UK alone, it's worth 37 billion. There's really is more than enough to go around. Even the big players have got a very small percentage of the market. So it's not a market where there are just a few players that are stealing market share. And of course, the joy of recruitment is that all you need to do as a strategy is steal market share. You can't make the market bigger. You can't make more recruitment happen. All you've got to do is eat other people's lunch. So again, a bunch of well-informed, well-networked people have got a good chance of helping each other to do that. There's, as you said, there's more than enough to go around.
Another trait that I'm seeing is a lot of them are becoming hyper niche in their specialization. Is that something that you tend to advise companies on?
Only if it's the right niche.
Good answer.
Either be hyper niche or present yourself as a series of hyper niche sectors. So rather than just saying, I'm an IT or technology generalist, or I'm, broadly recruiting the financial space, I think either be a niche specialist, although there is a danger to that if you're just in one, but to present yourself as a specialist in those niche areas, and present yourself in the form that you want to speak to the marketplace, the clients who want that niche and that expertise, and the candidates who want that. So yes is the answer to that, but not just as one niche, and choosing the right niches.
I'm living in a little bit of fear that we're around the corner from a bit of a dip in the economy, and I think a lot of recruitment companies are maybe going to experience difficulty for the first time in quite some time. What advice do you have for them?
Well, if you're right, and I suspect you might be, that there could be a dip, I don't live in fear. I live in absolute excitement about it, because from my own career, when I've run my own companies, it's during recession that we've really stolen a march on the rest of the market. And I would encourage the companies I advise that if indeed there's a dip in the market, to make sure that you're in the right sort of shape, and let others suffer from that dip, because the immediate reaction will typically be, cut costs, cut commission schemes, do this, that, and the other, which will all be the wrong things to do. So I think a good company is one that's ready for a dip or a change in the market. And you know what? The recruitment market is really a very adaptable place to be. And if you're set up properly, and let's say the UK industry dropped from 37 billion to 33, it's still a bloody big market with plenty to go at. So, I rightly or wrongly don't have any fear or trepidation about a downturn, although I'm not sure one's coming. But if one did, if you're fit and you're ready and you're capable and you're planned properly, then actually embrace it, because let your less well-prepared competitors suffer more than you do.
Well, let's jump into that. I'm a young founder. I've scaled the company to X size. We've invested a bit of money, and the dip has happened, but luckily I've got John Sullivan on speed dial. Ring ring, John, how are you? I don't know what to do. What do I do to make sure I'm in good shape?
Well, look, that's a great question. And the first answer to that would be we should have spoken a year ago rather than when the downturns happened.
But I need your help now, John.
Well, it's all about preparation. And, the things that will help you to survive and thrive. I talked earlier about people. If you've got great people around you, they'll always find a way. If your own staff and management are committed, prepared to change direction slightly, prepared to tack differently because of the weather conditions, then they will almost certainly see you through. And, part of that is about having great relationships with clients. And again, for me, that's one of the pillars to build into the business. If you've got deep and meaningful relationships with a broad spectrum of clients, not just a few, but across a broad spectrum, that gives you a much more chance of thriving and surviving in any downturn. It's very unlikely that all of those clients are going to stop recruiting at the same time. If you're well financed, make sure that you're properly funded. You've got enough air cover to make sure that the company can, trade in flatter, calmer waters. And make sure you've got all your systems and methodologies around you that are robust. And we'll see you through the test of time. Because one thing's for sure, if there's a downturn, it'll end. They always have. There's never been one that didn't. So there'd be an element of battening down the hatches, making sure you took any waste cost out of the business, although I'd suggest you did that anyway, even in an upturn. And great people, good plan, prudence and well-funded around good relationships with clients, and you should do well and thrive.
John, everybody's a non-exec these days, right?
Yeah.
How does a founder choose who their non-exec's going to be? Like, how do you cut through all that noise?
Well, you are right. I mean, I started advising being external. I don't, because I think it's a bit of a misnomer, but external advisor, and that can take whatever form you want it to be. In some of mine, I'm a formal chairman and a registered director. In others, I'm a mentor to the owner and the owners. But I capture it all under the general heading of external advisors to the board. And when I started, there were probably 3 or 4 in the UK. There's now 3,000 or 4,000. Everybody who ever made a canvas call to a client is suddenly an NED, which is, I've got my own theory on that. When I write the book, it'll be a chapter of how my theory that there are more people now selling to the recruitment industry than work in it, I'm sure is right. But for me, if people were looking for an external advisor, you want it to be fit for purpose, and you want to make sure that the person's experience matches your aspiration. And the analogy I'd use is, look, if you want to run the London Marathon, as I did in 2004, I chose a coach who had done it several times. It just seemed to me to make sense to pick somebody with a track record. So I thought that was very important. A lot of people in that space nowadays don't have a meaningful track record. And I would say to any founder looking for somebody, ask them, if you've got a short list of people, what have you actually done? Have you founded a company? Have you run a company? What do you do in these circumstances? So I'd say that is important. The other thing I think is important, once you've established the heritage of that person, is to see how current it is. Because again, a lot of good people have done very well, but maybe in the dim and distant past. And I would want to know, how down with the kids you are. Because as soon as you say down with the kids, you're not down with the kids, are you? But how current is your experience? Do you really know what's going on? Or do you know about the KPI driven world of the 1980s? And again, as far as I'm concerned, because of my involvement with a lot of companies, I try and keep very, very current. And by the way, I'm not punting myself here as a non-exec because I'm full. But you asked the question, what should you look for? Somebody that's got a track record, a real one, that matches your aspirations, somebody who understands the current landscape within the market, and actually, somebody that you like and trust. I go back to the digital guru story. Well, we just got along. Those guys were ready to learn. They trusted me. I trusted them, and I just think that for me is the magic that makes it all work. But the key one, I suppose, is what have you actually? I think there are a lot of pretenders in the market who are marketing themselves as advisors, and they're not really. They haven't actually achieved anything of meaning.
John, thanks very much for coming on the podcast. I'd love to invite you to one of our live events if I can get you and some other impressive people around the table. I think we could have a great day's crack.
I think you're right. Yeah. Well, I enjoyed that. It was good questions, and I hope it proves useful to you and your listeners.
Thank you very much, John. Take care.
Take it easy. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Well, a massive thank you to John for coming on the podcast. What a great guest, and what a pillar of the UK recruitment community he is. And my favourite thing about doing this podcast is getting access to people that I'd never normally have access to. And I'm just buzzing that we got John O'Sullivan on the podcast to spend half an hour giving advice on how you can scale your recruitment company in the right way, and what you can do if you want to choose to go down the route of getting an advisor and a non-exec. So absolutely buzzing about this, really appreciative of his time. And if you've enjoyed the podcast and this episode, let me know. Hopefully we can get John involved in one of our roundtable discussions that we'll be hosting around the UK. The one we did in Brighton with Backdoor Barry, the recruiter's lawyer, Mark Zanowski, who is a recruitment entrepreneur, and Roy Ripper, the recruitment advisor and trainer last week, is going to be out later in the week. It'll be on our website. And I want to do more and more of those type of events. So, really buzzing about bringing the podcast to life. And again, thanks to John for coming on and sharing a bit of his wisdom with us. Happy hunting.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.